Are they already in Chicago? The one and only Leo Biaz. Hey, Leo.
I'm excited to be back, my man. It was 9 days in Vegas. We got stuck in the desert, and we had a little hangover remix out there, man.
I wore a wig to school once, and they said no headgear was allowed.
How did
spider web
was it
tights.
Obvious that it was a wig?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was having fun.
Wig.
See, this is exactly why we have them on the show, and this is what makes them fun.
You're listening to KXVS, the voice of Stockton, 92.1 FM.
Do you want to relive the golden days of Stockton? Join Nate Knott on Stockton Alive every first and third Monday at 6 p.m. Tune into thevoiceofstockton.org.
This is Barbara Barrigan-Perea with Delta Flows, a radio show by the Voice of Stockton and Restore the Delta. This is the weekly radio show where we discuss everything Delta related: the environment, water management, water quality, farming, history and culture, public events, recreation, Delta food, and the arts. Tune in to Delta Flows on KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at KXVS Radio.
KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, live. The Voice of Stockton at Stone Soup Studio. KXVS.org.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, presents Peace and Justice Radio Connections with Bruce Giudici.
Good evening. Peace and Justice Connections is on the air. We're talking tonight with Max and Kathy about actually the celebration of Medicare. It's the celebration of their, 53rd birthday. Happy birthday. And we'd like to talk about that and find out exactly where Medicare is going or where it's been. But I'd like to start talking, what we have is Kathy Mathis and Max Heinemann, who are local experts on how to get from where we are now to the single payer or Medicare for All program. But what I'd like to do is, it was drawn to my attention by Don here about an article that was in the Record today that was a pretty solid hit piece against Medicare for All program. And the headline says, study, Bernie Sanders Medicare for All projected to cost $32.6 trillion over 10 years. $32.6 trillion. Now, trillion dollars is 1,000 billion, and a billion is 1,000 million. So if we're talking about a trillion, is that like a million? That is a lot of money. And so and so we're talking, and it's over 10 years, we're talking about $3.2 trillion that this program is going to cost. If this is true. And yeah, I mean, if these are true numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to.
Yeah.
When it's true, that's what they said, but
Yes.
we don't know those statistics are true or not. Matter of fact, they're highly suspect.
Well, I can guarantee that they're not true, because I mean, there's no way that the rest of the world could afford this sort of program. I mean, how could?
Yet somehow they do.
And they do it less expensively than what we have in this country. So there must be something fishy about this. So I just wanted to read real quickly about this study that was released by a university-based Libertarian Policy Center. And they're talking about here that this Mercatus Center at the George Mason University in Virginia. Now, the George Mason University in Virginia is a very conservative college in just outside of Washington, D.C. And the claim here is that While the plan from Bernie Sanders would deliver significant savings on administration and drug costs, which everybody agrees, but increased demand for care would drive up spending, and that doubling federal, individual, and corporate income tax receipts would not cover the full cost, this study says. So, Max, you're sort of a numbers guy. I mean, you've read some contradictory studies.
Well, the one about single payer nationally was done a number of years ago, probably 8 or 10 years ago.
2013, not 5 years ago.
Oh, 2013?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was the Friedman study done at Amherst, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, which kind of specializes in doing healthcare financial studies.
Right.
They did the study for Romney for the state of Massachusetts.
Romney Care, which is what the Affordable Care Act was sort of modeled on to get Republican support.
And there have been a number of state bills for single payer. And they did the study for the California SB 562 before it died or will die momentarily.
Yeah. It may rise again, but we'll see.
Hopefully.
Yes.
And kind of the second paragraph in that study, it starts out that if single payer were instituted in the United States as a whole, in the first year that it is in effect, it would save $5 billion over the current expenses.
And that's $5 billion with a B?
I think you mean 500 billion.
I think the savings was $5 billion.
Okay, right.
I'm sorry, were you talking about California?
No, I was talking about national. The Friedman study nationally.
Well, I mean, I could read what this says.
Oh, okay. Good work.
So Friedman's analysis found that, quote, under the single-payer system created by H.R. 676, the U.S. could save an estimated $592 billion annually by slashing the administrative waste associated with the private insurance industry, which is $476 billion, and reducing pharmaceutical prices to European levels, which would be $116 billion. So, maybe the folks out at George Mason University aren't allowing for the possibility that we would get better deals on our drugs. Yeah. I don't know.
No, they're talking about the drugs still being less of a cost, but they're just saying that there would be so much more demand that it would just overwhelm the system. The author here says, and there's a quote, enacting something like Medicare for All would be a transformative change in the size of federal government, said this Charles Blahouse, who was a senior economic advisor to former President George W. Bush, who brought us Medicare D, the cost is no object drug plan that we have since 2006, I think it was enacted.
Yeah, I believe so.
And then he was also a public trustee of the Social Security and Medicare during the Obama administration, most probably not appointed by Obama, but a hangover from the Bush administration. Responding to the study, Sanders took aim at the Mercatus Center, which receives funding from the conservative Koch brothers. Coke industry CEO Koch is on the center's board, and what Sanders responded is if every major country on earth can guarantee health care to all and achieve better health outcomes while spending substantially less per capita than we do, it is absurd for anyone to suggest that the United States cannot do the same. This grossly misleading and biased report is a Koch brothers response to the growing support in our country for a Medicare for All program.
Yeah, they're scared.
Yeah, and $32 trillion is just an absurd number, unless I guess you were ultra rich and you think $1 billion is just chump change, because $32 trillion.
Like they say, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're
talking real money. Yeah, that's right. And then Blahouse says the report is his own work, not the Koch brothers. But of course, you don't have to buy the report; you just have to buy the author. And so this person is obviously, just coming up with all the costs without any consideration that there would be an attempt at cost control. Just because right now there hasn't been an attempt at cost control, because the Congress has insisted that we don't negotiate for drug prices and that we don't
Well, not only did they insist, they made it a law.
They made it a law that under so for Medicare and Medicaid they can't negotiate with drug companies.
That's right.
For price.
Well, and there's no importing from other countries generics.
That's right.
If we have to pay.
Yeah. So from Canada, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just when you're reading articles, I'm not going to say that it's all fake news, but the thing is that you really do have to look at the source. And when you see a headline that says $32.6 trillion is what single-payer health care is going to cost, really look at the sources and see who is behind it, because it's so very important these days. Right now, there's so much dark money and there's so much information that is generated from seemingly well-sourced people, but just have to follow the money. And I tell you, in Peace and Justice Connections here, follow the money, and you're going to follow the trail runs dry really fast. So we're not here for any sort of bottom line for individuals. What we're here for is to make certain that everybody is covered. And so anyway, it's an interesting article. I think it's a defensive article, and it's something that we all have to be aware of.
Well, and interesting they should choose today to publish that.
Right. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Medicare's birthday.
Medicare's birthday.
Shame on them.
Yeah. They just released it on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure there's no coincidence. So anyway, today is Medicare's
53rd anniversary of the signing of Medicare. Of the Medicare bill.
So what does Medicare give? I mean, that was back in
1965.
65. And so what has it given us? What has the Medicare done for us?
Well, it has provided health care for many, many more people, especially poor people. And it has changed a number of things. It desegregated Medicare. When it went into effect, you can no longer have segregated hospitals that bill Medicare. You have...
In 1965, that was earth-shattering.
Apparently.
Yeah. And in 2018, it's earth-shattering. Yeah. But that's fantastic. Yes. What else?
Care improved. The quality of care has improved since the institution of Medicare and Medicaid, which is called Medi-Cal in California.
Right.
The only state in the union that doesn't call it Medicaid is we're individuals.
Yeah.
And, so it's Medi-Cal in California.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Same thing, though.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And the difference between Medicare and Medicaid is Medicare is for people who are over a certain age, like say, is it always 65?
65 or disabled.
Or disabled, okay. And then for Medicaid, it's an income-based.
Right.
Okay. And generally, since, and so these days, at one point, seniors were the most low-income segment of our population, but now, regrettably, it's younger people, it's children. Yeah, so children are benefiting more from Medicaid, and seniors benefit from Medicare. So there's this vast middle, and maybe so vast, but it's the in between maybe 15 and 65 that is covered by private insurance, but not everybody. I mean, the military is covered by a socialized medicine. And the Veterans Administration.
Well, the military, active military, actually is a quasi-insurance program. TRICARE is essentially an insurance-based program, administered by insurance companies.
Okay. So then there's a cost to that. Is it as expensive as, say, Blue Shield or Blue Cross? I would doubt it. I can't imagine it being that.
Well, if you're active military, you're entitled to it. There is some cost, and if you move from one locale to another, it's in districts. The United States is divided up into districts, and if you move from one district to another district, you have to sign up in the new district.
Okay.
And there are some copay. Especially for dependents.
Okay, yeah, and then of course the Veterans Affairs. I mean, today there was a new person sworn in to be the head of the Veterans Administration, and they're in the midst of the reason why the first person who was there, Shulkin, supposedly got the boot was because he was resisting increased privatization of the VA. And so that's a battle that's happening now, is that we're talking about, because the VA is so backlogged, they say, well, let's turn to the private sector where things are so efficient.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, the VA is backlogged because when we went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, the fact that we're going to have more veterans and more veterans with disability and mental health problems was not taken into consideration, and changes made accordingly.
And maybe people didn't think we were going to be in Afghanistan for 17 years. Or that I mean, Iraq was going to be solved within, a year or so, and there were going to be, milk and honey and flowers and things. And
oil.
And oil. Yeah, well, of course, everything was going to be paid for by the oil. So just didn't seem to consider the locals' attitude about that. But yeah, so the lingering costs of war, and Peace and Justice Network has always been an advocate of nonviolent conflict resolution. The bottom line, one of the bottom lines of war is that we have a lot of folks who are damaged, and it is it's our responsibility to make certain that those people we try to make them as whole as we possibly can. But a failure of planning for that is part of the legacy of the Bush administration, as far as I'm concerned. So, and it's sad, but in terms of going forward with a single payer, well, let's stay on Medicare. So
it is Medicare's birthday.
It is Medicare's birthday, after all.
And by the way, we're going to celebrate, our local single payer group is going to celebrate Medicare's birthday tomorrow at Werlo's restaurant across the street.
And tomorrow's July 31st.
Right. And starting at 5:30.
Cool.
There will be free hors d'oeuvres.
Wonderful.
Sponsored by Single Payer San Joaquin.
Great.
And information about single payer and songs and music.
Nice. Very nice. And just to get energized about a healthcare system that we could expand to everyone. I mean, the very simple method of going to a Medicare for All system, where you just decrease the eligibility age by 5 years every year, allowing the insurance companies to gracefully bow out of their money grabbing scheme. That after 5 years we'd have the maximum year would go from 65 down to 40, and that would just suit me fine, because man, I'm 60 years old and I've had it with this private health insurance system. It's just horribly expensive.
As a person who is well above 65, I want to warn you that you still will have expenses if we continue the way we are. That you have to buy a Medicare D program, and I can't think of the name of the senior benefit, which is administered by insurance companies. And I defy you to find out how much the federal government subsidizes insurance companies for the senior benefit packages. But
it's one of those mysteries that top secret. Trade secrets.
Yeah, cost me about almost $600 a month.
$600 a month
for my wife and I.
Oh, for two. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it cost me about $2,000 a month. Well, it would cost me if I had to pay the full cost. My employer pays 3/4 of it, so it costs us about $500-$600 a month. But but that's because my employer absorbs 3/4, and that is a generous employer. A lot of employers only pay for their employees' cost, and then the rest of the dependents are on their own.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and the thing is that going to Medicare for All is not going to be, that's not going to be the end of the story. There has to be some discussion about cost containment.
Yes, and we have to make sure that we are not using insurance companies to provide this benefit, because they charge us an arm and a leg to do that.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's no reason why we can't have publicly funded insurance, or, as Kathy has mentioned before, the preferred would be a system like what Britain has, where you actually have the government that would employ the doctors, and then there would be essentially no profit motive at all. It would just be like it would be a fairly high paid job, but there wouldn't be all of the I don't know, chances of conflict of interest.
Well, whichever, that's one way.
Mm-hmm.
There are several methods.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the doctors in the hospitals and clinics and so on remain privately operated, that still will save significant amounts of money because it reduces the billing, the paperwork, and it just depends on which method the country or the state would favor.
Right, right. So if we went to a Medicare, so right now, so what else does Medicare cover other than? I mean, it covers basic health care. Does it do anything? Doesn't do dental, right?
Not currently.
So. No, and or vision.
I don't think so.
Not currently.
No. What about long-term care?
No.
No.
That's you have to understand. It covers 100 days under Medicare. For example, if you have an accident, that you're hospitalized, and then you need follow-up care and so on, you can get up to 100 days with Medicare. It covers long-term care under Medicaid or Medi-Cal.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, that is a significant amount of, that's a big part of our healthcare system.
Right. Because because it's an aging population.
Right. One in three Americans is, older Americans is covered by Medicare or Medicaid, for long-term care.
Wow. 1 out of 3?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I didn't get the ages, but I assume over 65.
Yeah, I would think, yeah. Right. So anyway, so it's right now, I mean, yes?
Actually, the single-payer programs that have been proposed, the ones that I know about, I mean, there are a number of them, they fashioned their coverage of long-term care based on what Medicare currently provides, which is the 100 days. And with a provision to do the study, to look at that within the first SB 562 was designed to do a study.
Which is the state, there was a state law.
State of California that was proposed.
We're trying to work on
that within 5 years there would be a study as to what the cost would be to extend that to the total long-term care.
Right.
And it because that has grown so quickly in recent years, the fear is that would overwhelm the system. The kind of the good news is that that has flattened out a little bit in the last year or two. That more care is being done by the family and in the home care rather than in nursing homes. That slightly fewer people are going to, percentage-wise, are going to nursing home care. So if other things become available, that may flatten out and be a little more reasonable.
Yeah, the whole funding, the system that we have right now is so fractured and so broken and so cost inefficient. It would. The bills that we have that are sitting out there seem to lack a vision of where we're going to be 10 years from now. I mean, one of Obama's complaints was, well, of course, if I were to start from scratch, I'd do a single payer system. But what we have now is, we are where we are, and so we have to pick up from where we are. And I would argue that, at this point, we can't afford to continue on with where we are.
I see that as a betrayal.
Yeah.
I would just, one of the big disappointments of my life.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people, the whole ACA and the Affordable Care Act and how that was negotiated down to what it ended up becoming, which was like Romney Care Light. And so
and subsidizing the insurance
and
companies.
subsidizing and keeping the insurance companies
and subsidizing them.
In the game as long as possible. I don't understand what reason, and except for the fact that so many legislators are afraid of the medical industry. They're so powerful. It's probably just as powerful as the gun lobby or
the medical and the insurance industry.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
right.
Insurance, pharma, and then the big hospitals.
Yeah. Huge money.
Those are the interests that carry the clout in the lobbying circles.
Yeah, and so when people start getting an idea that Medicare for all, it's not such a pie in the sky sort of idea anymore. It's something that actually could logically happen. You end up with stories like $32.3 trillion or $32 trillion.
They're scared. They're getting nervous.
And so the thing is that's a headline issue on the day that Medicare turns 53. It is it is as bogus as the scientists who swore that cigarettes didn't cause cancer, or that lead was not unhealthy to breathe, or to drink. There are just certain studies that are bought and paid for by folks who are making tons of money off the existing system, and the fact that this thing is coming out now is like what Sanders is saying. Medicare for all is starting to take some traction.
Well, I mean, on any given day in recent weeks, you could see the term single payer in a headline in a major blog or newspaper.
Yeah.
What gets me though is that the press does not give the total fact. Even if they talk about, like for example, in California, that the total cost for single payer would be almost always, they quote, 400 billion.
400 billion, yeah.
Which is not entirely accurate. It depends on how you compute the cost. There are things that reduce the cost immediately that they never mention. So the immediate cost is more like 31 to 35 billion, and they don't state that. The total cost is close to 400 billion, but there are immediate savings when you do that, and then there are savings down a number of unbelievable savings that you don't even think about that you gain throughout the first year.
Yeah. I was reading in this little article here what they're assuming in this $32 trillion is that essentially if we had a Medicare for all system, that the Medicare for all system would be unable to contain costs, that they would not be able to set prices for certain procedures, or wouldn't be able to set prices for drugs, or certain, and really, if you start looking at something that is not a market-based healthcare system, a lot of those costs are controllable. A lot of those things, in Britain,
Medicare controls costs.
Yes.
The hospitals and the physicians, they know how much they're going to get when they bill.
Yeah, and
not only that, they get paid right away.
Yeah, and without all the paperwork. And what they're saying is that the costs of the Medicare costs are 40% below regular prices. That's what this Mercatus thing is talking about.
Even
and
they
so,
have to admit that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the thing is 40%.
Excuse me. What?
I mean, I didn't read the article, but
right.
If Mercatus is quoting something that's laudatory for the Medicare program, I mean, that's something they probably didn't say because they wanted to.
No, that Medicare costs are 40% lower than regular costs, and
now,
so
I question that statistic too. Yeah. I'm more than happy to receive the Medicare rate, and it's easier to bill for.
Yeah, well, yeah, because
now Medi-Cal or Medicaid is quite a different story. That is very low, and not anywhere near a market value.
Yeah, because here it says, Mercatus study also takes issue with the key cost-saving feature of the plan that hospitals and doctors will accept payment based on lower Medicare rates for all their patients. Medicare rates are currently about 40% less than private insurance, according to the analysis. So maybe this analysis is not accurate as well.
That's not accurate.
They're inflating the
well, they've reversed it practically.
Right.
In my experience, the insurance rate is much lower than Medicare.
Oh, really?
Yes, definitely.
Huh. So the bottom line is that this is Peace and Justice Connections. We're talking with Kathy Mathis and Max Heinemann. We're talking about the birthday of Medicare and also the feasibility of possibly Medicare covering all of us at some point in the future if we all choose to do this. These are not the thing about our healthcare system is this isn't a natural phenomenon. It's not something like a hurricane or an earthquake that you have to deal with, or it's something that we can control. It's costs, it's availability, it's distribution of services, and it's something that we can logically control. And we have done that to a certain extent for our senior citizens, age 65 and over. It's just that for the younger ones, we just haven't, found the magic way to get past lobbyists and get past the for-profit system.
Mm-hmm. We really know what would work.
Yeah, we do. And so, and I would stress that, Medicare would probably love to have a 64-year-old or a 63-year-old or a 62-year-old, because chances are as you get younger, the chances are that you're going to need less medical care. That's why people just love the 20 and 30-year-olds that they can sell insurance to, because they know that generally those folks are going to use a lot less insurance than an 85-year-old.
Yes. If everyone was covered by Medicare, the cost of Medicare would seemingly go down.
Right.
I mean, the per individual cost.
Yeah, the average cost per patient would be less.
Right.
Right. And but this study that we see in the record is saying, well, increased demand is going to make costs skyrocket. Well, I don't see how adding a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds to the Medicare system is going to cause the system to skyrocket. I mean, it's especially if the way that you fund this system, if we have a percentage of income or a percentage of I don't know what sort of funding mechanisms have been tossed about for coming up with funding for Medicare. I mean, is it like an income tax, or would it be a sales tax, or a per cap?
Are you talking about single payer / Medicare for all?
Right.
Because I can reference the Friedman study because I was just looking at it.
Okay.
So 3 methods. One was the top 5% of our income bracket would have to pay more.
Okay.
Whatever.
And they're doing that now with the medical devices tax, right? And there's like there's some sort of tax that and then also on upper income people to provide the subsidies for low income folks for the
well,
insurance.
actually the tax you pay for Medicare, you pay a very low tax, income tax for Medicare. Yeah. That is more for upper income people, a little bit more.
Yeah.
Not
well, yeah, because it's 1.4 for and my little background in payroll is that the employer and the employee each put in 1.45% into the Medicare system, and there is no limit on how on the wage income that you can have that 2.9% sum be charged against. So if you make $1 million, if you make $1 billion, you're going to still have that same 2.9% being thrown into the Medicare into the Medicare pot, whereas for Social Security that is capped off at like your first 130,000, 140,000, which for most of us that's where we are. But for some people who are mega rich, the Social Security fund is if you make $130,000 or if you make $1 million, you're going to pay the exact same amount into Social Security, and that's why a lot of people think that it's a different topic. But why Social Security not being solvent is a bogus issue, because all you need to do is increase that cap up to $1 million, and via law you've added 20 years to the Social Security solvency.
Yes, and that's one thing. And of course, they any number of places you can hear that. Well, I don't care about Social Security because there won't be any when I retire,
Right.
which is just a total exaggeration and totally untrue. Even the worst scenario is that Social Security, at its current rate, is on schedule to exist indefinitely. That in 2040, in order to account for the change in demographic, the amount you would receive would be up to 20% less. But that would, and then gradually that would work itself out and it would return to what it is now. But of course, not too many people are going to be happy with a 20% cut.
Right. So you think that 22 years down the road, between now and 22 years down the road, there would be some political pressure to fix that. Right. And so that a lot of these projections.
Well, and of course, the pressure among some political parties is to fix it by privatizing it.
Right.
Which definitely is not what we want. If you want a private insurance or a retirement program, fine.
It's not.
Don't mess with Social Security.
It's not just that it's not feasible, but that it's not that we would like. It's not what most people would like. When George W. Bush started his second term, I mean, one of the things he was going to use his political capital was to privatize or to move towards a privatized Social Security system, and it went nowhere because people do not want. They don't want people to touch their Social Security.
Well, and then we had just a classic example of what would happen if they had done that.
Yeah.
In 2007, 2008, we would have had soup lines of 65-year-old people because if they had privatized Social Security, their income would be gone.
Indeed, and this is definitely getting off the topic, but in 2008, with the stock market crashing, I currently work at an agency that has a retirement plan that's in lieu of Social Security. So if you work there for your 20 or 25 years, you would put money into your Social Security or into your retirement fund instead of Social Security. But what it was a defined benefit program, a defined contribution program as opposed to a defined benefit. And so what would end up happening is if you put $200,000 into that plan over your 20-year life at that work, and then you retired, you would only have that $200,000 to live off of. Now, if you retired in 2008, you would have seen that nest egg would probably have been cut in half, and then you would only have $100,000 to live off
or
of.
less.
Yeah, and you would have had no time to recoup that. Whereas with a Social Security plan, you have a defined benefit that is going to be there until the day you die. And so it's not necessarily the only part of your retirement plan, but it's a key part to make certain that you keep the lights on, that you're not going to get kicked out of your apartment, and that maybe you can eat something more than cat food. So it's as just a basic level, but if you go into this in a privatized type of system, you end up in a situation where it's very risky for folks. In fact, that's what we're talking about for medical as well. I mean, you put yourself into a private system, you're putting you're putting yourself into the hands of a system that is making money off of your malady, and there is no cost containment. So you are just you're at major risk of losing everything if you have a major health disaster.
Well, that's the reason I advocate for single payer. I just think it's a real tragedy that some people do become bankrupt over illnesses, and that there are so many more people who worry about it. And I don't care how secure you are financially, an illness could wipe you out.
Yeah.
I mean, there are very few people who have the money that that could cover a major illness.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be an accident. I mean, it can just be something that happens. I mean, it's a genetic thing, or it could be any malady that somebody. I've been, you know, very fortunate in my life to not have to go to the hospital. But I mean, there are some folks who are just, you know, who've just been wiped out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't happen.
No, it's sinful.
That shouldn't happen here.
So,
there were two other forms of financing, though, that were proposed in 2013 when Gerald Friedman did the study on a national health plan. The other two were a payroll tax, which he didn't, which isn't defined, but
that's what we have now.
We could negotiate.
Like the 1.45% on both employer-employee, you could increase that to 2% or 3% or 5%.
Yeah.
And so and that's already a mechanism that exists. Those funds go into the Medicare fund. It's a separate fund from the general fund or from the Social Security fund. It's a and it's from which out of that medical bills are paid. And so that would be a very easy mechanism.
And then the third one was the Tobin tax, which you explained to me was the partial percentage on every
stock trade. Right.
Yeah.
And that would have the benefit of slowing down rampant speculation that we saw in 2008, or that we saw that you see even now. I mean, we have a stock market that is like at 24,000 points, and you know for every transaction that happened, there's no tax charged. And if you can imagine that if there was even a fraction of a percent on every transaction, the amount of money that would be generated would be astronomical.
Well, I know Bernie Sanders talked about financing college with that.
Yeah, it's
like 0.25%.
Yeah,
and it would slow up those traders that trade. They have a machine that trades for them by the second.
By the second.
Yeah. And just on the chance of having a fraction of a percentage of that stock price, you can make money on it. So if you just keep on doing those transactions, with every transaction, it's just more and more risky. If everything starts going south, you can have all of everybody selling, and the stock market can just crash.
Another funding measure was SB 562. It was rather unique. It called for two major funding sources. One was a sales tax, and the benefit of the sales tax was that everyone participates. Yeah. Everybody has to buy something.
Yeah.
But
it is regressive.
Well,
I mean,
but they did exempt a bunch of things like groceries and a certain amount of, like first $1,500.
Yeah, and actually,
so very poor people wouldn't have to pay anything.
If you're eligible for Medi-Cal or Medicaid, you got a refund, a cash refund, to offset the cost of the sales tax, the other part of that tax was a tax on income. Businesses who had $2 million or more of income would pay a percent on that, and that ended up being an astronomical amount of money because of the current state of the economy in the United States. That went up way more than they anticipated.
Yeah, the amount of money that has been shifted from regular folks to the very ultra rich in this country in the past 10 years, 20 years, has just been astounding. I mean, and it's unremarked upon, except in the pages of Connections, of course, that there's never been in this country such a gap between the rich and the poor, and the ultra rich are just doing very, very well, and in fact they just got a huge tax cut, and in an article we just had read in Connections this last week was talking about how corporations and how they're taking those tax cuts and they're buying back their own stock so that they can increase the value of their stock, so that the folks who are compensated in stock options are able to cash in on those things at lower capital gains rates than they would in previous years. The game is definitely stacked in favor of very well-off folks, and to say that there is not there's just an abundance of cash that these companies are sitting on, and to say that we cannot afford to move forward, this $32 trillion just blows me away. That we can't make a American attempt. We landed people on the moon for crying out loud. Now we can't even have a medical system that's the equal of Denmark. I think that or any other European country that has a worry-free healthcare system that they're not being paid an arm and a leg out of. That's just a lack of a courage and imagination on the part of Americans.
When we look at European systems, though, we should be aware that most of the European countries use an insurance program, but they are able to do this because the government has way more control over the insurance companies. And as a matter of fact, they can change the cost and the percentages and so on at will to regulate the insurance companies. We don't have that here.
Right.
So if we were to do something like Sweden or Switzerland, theirs is primarily insurance companies. They have a tiny country.
They're nonprofit.
Yeah.
There's two of them. You can pick one or the other.
Yeah. Right. And if you can't afford it, you can apply to the government to help pay your premium.
Yeah, there's a lot of models out there that we don't necessarily have to glom onto any single one. We can talk about an American type of version that would accommodate our population, our age, our demographics. And we can adjust that. I mean, it's the idea that we have to just go with whatever the market, gives us, and say, well, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles. We just have to, the market is all seeing and all knowing. We have to stop that mindset. Definitely in terms of healthcare, because healthcare should not, to my mind, should not be a market-driven system. It drives up costs, and it drives it gives perverse incentives to insurance companies to not want to insure people who need health care the most.
Well, it's just flat out wrong and immoral for anybody to profit off of the suffering of another.
Yeah.
And that's just what
that's
insurance
what
companies do.
And I think people are starting to wake up to that.
Medicare, over the past, 50 years.
Which is 53 years old today.
53 years old today. Has contributed to the life expectancy to the tune of 5+ years.
Wow.
And we're still 3 to 5 years lower than most other industrialized countries.
Wow. Yeah.
But even still, I mean, just the quality of life for the elderly and for their children who don't have to worry about, what if mom or dad needs XYZ. Yeah. It's just been a big relief.
Yeah.
And relief is huge.
Yeah.
Lack of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
is a big quality of life thing. Yeah.
And I wouldn't, the fact that our life expectancy is less, I don't think is a function of Medicare, but I think it's a function of the system that brings the.
It's as good as it is because of Medicare.
Yeah.
It would be worse if we didn't have Medicare. But the insurance model, the for-profit insurance companies is what keeps our life expectancy down.
That's right. So tomorrow night, Werlo's.
Yep.
At 5:30. 5:30, and Werlo's is on the Miracle Mile.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, sort of across from Tap Plastics or across from the Peace Center here. And it is the celebration, it's the party for Medicare. It's going into the next 53 years.
So you can go, you get free hors d'oeuvres.
There you go.
You can go for dinner, but you have to buy your own sandwich or whatever, and your own drinks.
And meet like-minded folks who are just really concerned about our healthcare system and want to make a change that would benefit all of us.
Or you can make your dinner out of it, hors d'oeuvres.
There you go. Yeah, that's right.
my favorite.
Yeah, that's really. Yeah. So, yeah. I'm just dumbfounded by studies that just throw around numbers just like they're just like they're toys, or just like they're
and I think our press has a response. If we're going to have free press, a free press in the United States, they have to be more responsible.
Yeah.
This is a lack of responsibility to publish that without looking at, and it's a lack of responsibility to say that single payer would cost $400+ billion in California, and not mention that there's an instant savings.
Yeah.
Well, there was an economist who responded to this particular study by pointing out that the same report shows that total U.S. healthcare spending would fall by about $2.05 trillion during that time period, even as all Americans would finally have insurance, because the plan would reduce payments to doctors and hospitals to Medicare rates, which are lower than what private insurance pays, while saving on prescription drug costs and administrative expenses. So apparently even Bernie Sanders tweeted out, even a Koch brothers funded attempt to trash Medicare for All can't hide the truth. Medicare for All will lead to a $2 trillion reduction in national health expenditures over 10 years.
So that the 32 trillion must be just talking about increased demand, where more and more people are just, all these sick people are going to come out of the woodwork. I'm going to just go to the doctor for nothing. I've not gone to the doctor for a very long time.
Not my favorite thing to do.
And
necessarily.
I tell you, I mean, if it's a Medicare for All thing, I mean, I'm not just going to go straight to the doctor, but I'll feel a whole lot better knowing that if I did have to go to the doctor,
right,
I'm not worried about how much it's going to cost, or whether I'm going to lose my house, or whether any all sorts of financial stuff would happen. It's just there's so many benefits. Yeah, I would just
you
go.
would have the blood drawn,
Right.
you would have the imaging study that you need, and you would get your diagnosis, and you would get your treatment.
Pretty much like what everybody in every other country thinks of when they visit another country and they have to go to the hospital. They're just surprised that they just go, they get treated, they don't get a bill, and they're just amazed. That's that. It's what a lot of people expect in other countries, but here, you're hit with a big bill sometimes for a very small service. I mean, it can be, just a checkup, and you can be charged quite a bit if you go to the hospital, if you go to the emergency room, especially if you use an ambulance. My gosh.
I'd like to at least address the question of taxes, because I know the response from the right is, well, your taxes will go up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, taxes will go up. We will be paying for this service. But the thing is, when you need the service, you won't have to pay then.
Yeah.
And you won't have to worry.
Deductible.
Once you have paid your taxes, you are done.
Yeah.
Your health care costs are over.
Yeah.
And actually, you in most cases, you will save money. The study with California, SB 562, was up until you have $500,000 a year, the family of four saves money. They get an increase in taxes, but they have they're not paying for health insurance, and they're paying less medical costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was surprising. There was, let's see, my wife went to get some medication, and they were going to charge her, I believe, it was $800. And it wasn't, and we hadn't yet reached our deductible. And so she said, well, it's going to cost you $800. We're not going to pay $800. Last time I paid $40. She said, $40. And she said, well, that's because last time you didn't use your insurance. Now, if you just paid for this, on your own, you'd pay $40. But if it went through your insurance, your insurance would be charged $800, and you would have to pay that because you haven't yet reached your deductible on this. So she said, okay, I won't use my insurance on this. I'll just pay the $40. And so the thing is that there are tiered rates for drugs to say, well, and if the insurance company, if the pharmacist knows that they're going to be charging the insurance company, generally, if you have bad insurance like us, then you're going to end up having to pay pay it as part of your deductible. But if you had good insurance, like say you had like maybe a $500 deductible or something, that $800, you wouldn't worry about that because it would be paid for by your insurance company.
Right.
So there's this gaming of the system that a lot of folks are doing. And my wife was saying, well, I got to report that to somebody because that's just not right. That you have these two different costs just based upon whether you have insurance or not.
So she reported it to you.
Yeah, she reported it to me. Yeah, but yeah. So when that just happened, a couple weeks ago, but it was just so obvious that this is a symptom of a system that is just really corrupt, that has just become a money game. It's no longer about it's almost like the stock market. I mean, it's not about healthcare anymore.
There is this other thing that insurance companies do also. They will make deals with drug manufacturers, since you have generics and then name brand drugs. They will pay an insurance company to have one or the other on the formulary, the insurance company formulary, and not the other one. They get a big discount in the cost. And so when you go to the pharmacy to get this drug, you're automatically going to get the one where where the deal is. You don't have a choice of the generic or the name brand. I guess you do.
Yeah.
Well, it's not on the formula. You pay the total cost yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's these games. When I worked at the MAC Health Board, I mean, the nailing down of what the price was of a drug just depended on what the day was and who the broker was. It was. And it was just arbitrary. I mean, it would change from day to day, and it had nothing to do with the underlying value of the drug, but it just happened to be what the profitability of the drug was at that given moment,
and who got paid to have it on their formulary.
Right. Yeah. And these schemes are very complex. And they're almost like stock trades, stock derivatives, or whatever. I mean, they're highly financial in nature, and they're not designed to provide health care,
right?
So anyway, tomorrow night at Werlo's,
right,
at 5:30, it's a happy birthday party for Medicare, 53, and it sounds like there's a lot to celebrate. I mean, we may not have moved as far down the road as we would like to have had, but we're
hanging in there.
We're hanging in there. Medicare has not been privatized, despite many attempts. In fact, I think the case for Medicare is growing.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to point out that just last month, the House of Representatives formed a Medicare for All caucus.
Yeah.
It includes 70 Democrats. And there are 122 Democrats, at least according to this particular article, it may have gone up since then, who have co-signed H.R. 676.
Wow.
So there's a number of people who could still join that caucus.
Wow.
And it's fighting for single-payer health care, Medicare for all.
And in the House at 218 is the majority. You have to have 218 to pass a bill. And so if we're almost halfway or over halfway there, that's
if we get all of those people to join that particular caucus.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Center for American Progress wing of the Democratic Party is trying to peel off some support by implementing a public option or something else. But there is a dedicated core that wants to implement Medicare for all.
Well, it's critical that we vote. Do we know that Jerry McNerney is one of those, is a member?
I don't think he's in the...
Okay.
Actually, he may or may not be a member of this new caucus. He definitely has co-signed H.R. 676. One of our new members of the local PNHP chapter that we just formed said she contacted his office and that he will be joining the caucus if he hasn't already done so.
Do you have a meeting for that? That's coming up?
That is coming up soon. We just had our first meeting.
Yeah, so we decided the third Monday evening of the month we were going to have our meetings.
Yeah, because that's what we did last week, right? It was last week, the third Monday.
Yeah.
So, we're going to meet the third Monday the month at Max's house.
So that's the 20th of August.
Yay.
Okay.
And what's the address?
1520
Okay.
North San Joaquin Street.
Okay, very good.
1 block directly west of St. Joseph's Hospital.
At what time?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. The
And
classic time.
PNHP is Physicians for a National Health Program.
Wonderful. And single payer, they're still meeting? Is there
Single Payer San Joaquin meets every second Thursday of the month at the Peace and Justice Center at 6:30 p.m.
Okay, and that would be the 9th, Nagasaki Day, for that
yeah,
meeting.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Next week we're going to be talking with Val from Tri-Valley Cares, and it will be Hiroshima Day, and we're going to be talking about Site 300 and the explosions that are happening there that are an environmental disaster. So it'll be interesting to talk about that. Today we're celebrating, though, the 53rd anniversary of Medicare. We've been here with Kathy Mathis and Max Heinemann. My name is Bruce Giudici. I'm with Peace and Justice Connections. Good evening.
Good evening.